Moving on to the wide receivers, Marvin Mims back in the fold, 32 catches, 5 touchdowns. Jaden Hazelwood, much was expected of him. He's now gone to Arkansas after 39 catches and 6 touchdowns. Mario Williams makes his departure as expected to USC. So a lot of talent lost at the wideout position.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out in 2022 because there are a lot of people following this program that would say depth is a concern at wide receiver. And as I look at the wide receiver room at this point in time, my response to that is okay, how? How do you look at that wide receiver room and conclude that depth is a concern? Because right now you have 9 scholarship wide receivers. You have several guys that have been key cogs in this offense in years past. You're looking at Marvin Mims. You're getting Theo Weiss back. Drake Stoops has been as stable and consistent as anybody in that Oklahoma offense over the past 2 seasons. And not only that, but beyond your 9 scholarship guys, you've got a couple of very highly regarded preferred walk-ons in Gavin Freeman and Davion Woolen, guys that said no to Power 5 scholarship offers or FBS scholarship offers in order to walk on at Oklahoma. So those are guys that can play a little bit of ball themselves. Moreover, your 4-star tight end signee in the 2022 cycle, Caden Helms, at this point is more of a wide receiver than he is a tight end. And that's also a guy that, based on what I've heard he's doing in winter workouts, that's a guy that could see some snaps right off the bat as a true freshman as well. But regardless, you have 12 guys right there in that mix that I think are more than capable of stepping onto the field and playing wide receiver at Oklahoma in 2022. But especially when you look at the top end of that roster, Marvin Mims has the opportunity and has the talent to be one of the most productive and one of the most dynamic weapons in all of college football in the passing game. He was massively underutilized last season at Oklahoma. Moreover, Theo Weiss, if you'll recall, led the team or tied for the team lead in receptions going back to 2020 when he was a sophomore. Missed the 2021 season with that foot injury, but you get him back in the fold. That's huge. And then, of course, Drake Stoops, a guy that just gets the job done by hook or by crook. He always finds a way to get open, and anything that you throw at him, he's going to catch. Now, beyond those 3, and those 3 are the guys that I think you'll see starting at wide receiver, at least initially. Beyond those guys, you've got Trayvon West, who made some nice plays in sporadic playing time in both 2020 and 2021. You got Brian Darby, who made a statement down the stretch with a touchdown catch against Texas Tech and a touchdown catch against Oklahoma State. You got Cody Jackson, a guy a lot of people forget about because an injury, well, I guess I shouldn't call it an injury, a medical issue cost him the latter 2/3 of the 2021 season as a true freshman. But he was a guy that was seeing the field quite a bit early on and making some nice plays at the wide receiver position. So that's a guy that I would have my eye on, as well as somebody that can be a rotational contributor. Got a couple of really nice, really physically imposing true freshmen in Nick Anderson and Jaden Gibson coming on. Anderson 6'4", Gibson 6'5". So there's talent aplenty in this wide receiver room. I think for my money, you've got to make an effort to get Mims the ball as much as possible. If you look at the way that Lincoln Riley used wide receivers in 2021, I was talking to my coworker, Brandon Drum, about this last night on our podcast over at OUinsider.com. It is possible to witness your wide receiver room undergo death by 1,000 cuts. And that's really what Lincoln Riley did to his receivers in 2021, because as much as they were rotating out, as much as they were subbing, and as much as they were distributing the ball all across the board, you ended up with a lot of dissatisfied guys that felt like they should have gotten the ball more. And you had Marvin Mims, and it's easy to say, sure, Marvin Mims should have gotten the ball more. Jaden Hazelwood should have gotten the ball more. Mike Woods, Mario Williams should have gotten the ball more. The harsh reality, Mark, is you can't make more targets for every single one of those guys. You got to decide who's going to make the biggest impact on a week-to-week basis, on a play-to-play basis for your football team, and you got to make it a priority to get them the ball. For my money, Marvin Mims was and is the most talented wide receiver on this Oklahoma roster. And there is a reason why he was strongly considering entering the transfer portal after the 2021 season. And it's because there would be games where he had the ball thrown his way 2 or 3 times, and he'd only be in the game for 40-50% of the snaps. That's a travesty when you have a guy that not only is as talented as Marvin Mims has proven to be, but had a freshman season in 2020 that was remarkable by any definition, and that presumably was a stepping stone to a much greater role in the offense. So Mims has to be the guy that is your wide receiver one in 2022. You can't let him get lost in the shuffle the way that Lincoln Riley did. And I do think if you look at Jeff Lebby's offenses historically, they have been tremendously conducive to the production of the lead wide receiver. And to me, that's Marvin Mims. I think you got a couple of really key third down targets in Drake Stoops and Theo Weiss. And then a guy I haven't even mentioned yet, Jalil Farouk, who came on very strong in the Alamo Bowl win. Best friends with Caleb Williams going back to childhood. So it says something about Jalil Farouk that he stayed and stuck it out at Oklahoma, even when his childhood best buddy went to USC. But a lot of people are excited to see what kind of dynamic Farouk can bring to this passing game and how much of an asset he'll ultimately be. But they've got weapons at wide receiver. At Oklahoma, you never really worry about the wide receiver room. Even when there's a lot of unknown, generally there's a guy that emerges. Think back to D.D. Westbrook's outstanding Biletnikoff award-winning season in 2016. Nobody went into that season figuring he'd win the Biletnikoff award, but all of a sudden, week to week, that was a guy that was going for 150 yards on 10 catches and a couple of scores every single game. And so I'm not saying any one guy has that much of an impact for Oklahoma in 2022, but what I am saying is you will see elite numbers from a guy like Marvin Mims, and you will see Theo Weiss made a critical part of the game plan. And you'll see guys like Jalil Farouk and Cody Jackson rotating in and stretching the field. But what you're not going to see is 5 or 6 wideouts that each have 30 catches, 400 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Sure, there's something to be said for spreading the wealth and distributing it all equally. But like I said, if that's the approach you take, you end up with some wideouts that are really, really frustrated with their usage or lack thereof.